Thank you for taking the time to watch my TMW TMT enhancement video. This is the first time I've made something like this. I'm trying to make it brief, so I'm going to be speaking pretty quickly, and I tried to pack as much as I could into this little video as possible. Just know that I'm trying to provide a glimpse into the issue, but each one of these issues tends to be something that I see over and over in the system and causes some sort of time impact to a parts administrator, shop leader, whoever's operating inside of the system. I did not try and do things that were specific to me. I'm trying to do things that I think will universally add value across all of your users. And if you did the time and motion studies on these before and after, I think that you would find that you're going to have savings across these. And I tried to create some of the data for us and how you could kind of drive metrics across all of your organization with that. My client is a new client. Within the last 2 months we've been using the system, I helped them prop up the implementation, the instance, and went through the training, trained their people, and then have been active in the system ever since. We're currently using TMW Cloud. I'm calling it TMW Cloud because that's what it says in the URL. I hear different names across the board, across the phone tree to the system, whatever else, but I just am going to call it TMW Cloud. We're using the fleet maintenance program. My role is to act as a liaison between the software company and the organization that I work for. My goal is to drive as much value with the system, implementing the features of the system that will get the company into a better technological state, fill in all the gaps in the schedule, fill in the gaps in the data, make sure that it all works, and then work with the staff to make sure it's all functioning correctly, help integrate with accounting, and do all that good stuff. I want to reduce waste, reduce time loss in the system, and I want to incorporate the procedures of the shop into the procedures in the system so that they're working hand in hand and getting utilized in real time, which is everybody's goal. So I'm going to run through as quickly as I can each one of these small scenarios. I laid them out on Chrome. I'm going to tab over to that, and we will take a look at some of these specific examples that I think are easy wins, low-hanging fruit for us to improve the product. Again, bear with me. It's my first time doing something like this. So, purchase orders versus repair orders. There's a feature that exists on the repair orders that does not exist on the purchase orders. When I start typing a part number here, nothing happens. When I go to a repair order and I start typing a part number, it auto-populates. This feature needs to be available everywhere in the system, not just on the repair order screen. If it can happen for the parts, I know it can happen for just about any other field in the system. So this feature is huge, and it saves everybody a ton of time. Every time that you have to interact with these binoculars, the searches are clunky, there's a lot of validation, there's a lot of extra rules, there's a lot of extra timing, and it makes you not want to interact with those binoculars. For a lot of the areas like the units or the vendor fields, I have to have cheat sheets sitting out in order for the user to use them. Here's another example. A unit, same thing. I can type in a value on the repair order screen. It's going to populate everything where that value exists in the unit description. When I go to a purchase order and I type in a vendor, nothing happens. This would be extremely helpful if these all had auto-populate dropdowns. It saves a ton of time. As an example, if I click into here, there's a validation time. I then have to tab over. I have to type in the name of the vendor. I have to hit search. I can't hit enter because the entry rules are a little bit weird. I have to click on the record, and I have to hit OK or double click on the record. All of that, and that could all be gone if we had auto-populate in here. Plus, it would really help you identify if you needed to create a new vendor or whatever right up front without having to even go into the search field. So that auto-populate field would be massive for data entry people. So that is my drop-down fields. If we standardize the auto-populate feature for parts and for basically every single field, that drop-down field should work. So the second scenario that I'm going to go through is when to validate and process a transaction. So for instance, let's say that I begin typing in a new vendor and it doesn't exist, and I get distracted and I click on another tab and I come back. It validates that field. That field now, it tells me it's not found, but I never asked it to execute that feature. I don't know why every time that you leave and come back or you do anything else, or if you hit enter, that field no longer works. Now, as an extra added glitch to this, If I go now to try and update this vendor and find this vendor, that field is now broken. I think that's just a bug in the system, not an overall functionality issue. But if you make a mistake, you then have to go through and create a whole nother PO, and then there's an extra phantom PO somewhere in the system that's going to skip 438 as a result of that particular issue. Jumping back, so that is like what happens when you put in an incomplete vendor. I think I would consider that a bug. I think that there's different times when the system should be validating, and it should be validating on save, not on, clicking somewhere else or opening up another field or whatever else. A very similar thing happens when you're on like the parts catalog. Here's an example of that. All right, I'm here. I start typing a part. Again, I get distracted. I go click on another tab. I go back to it. It chooses to validate inside of the system, takes the time, says it's not a valid part. This sort of thing is kind of annoying until I hit enter, click on the binoculars, whatever exactly the practice is going to be in the system. It shouldn't do those validations because of the processing time in the system. Each time it creates a little bit of frustration, stops you from what you're doing, and slows down your momentum. So that's incomplete vendor, part catalog search, keystroke and entry. The second page, new part description. Okay. So I like this. This is one of the few places where there's a shortcut key inside of the system. It would be really nice if this was more standard across the system. So I'm going to create a new test part. Notice I started typing the manufacturer. It allowed me to start typing into that field. And once it did its validation, it deleted the entry into that field, and I have to start back over again. There are numerous areas in the system where while it's validating, it allows you to start typing into another field, and it just deletes the work that you've done. It's really frustrating, and it happens all over the system. So it's just something that needs to be addressed and corrected inside of the system. The validation needs to have proper timing and needs to be executed at the moments when it actually makes sense for it to take place. So there's the incomplete vendor and part catalog validation issues. Now I'm going to go to the keystroke and entry, the second page of a new part description. So for instance, let's go here. Second page of a new part. Very similar. 013, tab, start typing. Again, it does the same thing. It deletes the record. Again, it happens all over the system. That's just two examples of where it takes place inside of the system. Let's see. Keystroke and entry. This is more of a workflow issue that I've noticed, and that is that, let's see, I got one already available right here. Okay, so if I'm tabbing through, I add a part, whatever that part is, one. Again, it doesn't auto-populate. It's kind of tricky here. I add the part, I tab to quantity, but then it tabs to non-mandatory fields. It should do the three fields, the part, quantity, unit price, description, 4 fields, not 3, and then go to the optional fields. The fact that it goes down in this order doesn't exactly make too much sense. In addition, you notice that when I tab through on this record, it actually starts tabbing into the previous screen in the background. It should be focusing its energy onto this one single set, this single form. And in this instance, it's nice. I can tab and get to the save field. Most other places in the system, it doesn't even allow you to tab into where the buttons are located. So you have to do some hybrid of mouse and keyboard stroke in order to get the work done. New parts entry workflow. So when I come up on this part and I go to enter a part and it doesn't exist, it says this does not exist. Local parts are not allowed. There is no local part. The part doesn't exist. So I have to go and start a new part creation process. And I'll tell you, that's a very clunky section of the system. And you have to then go to Trimble, you have to open up a master, you have to open up a parts catalog, you have to open up a shop inventory. You do these things separate. It would be very, very helpful if that, instead of that error coming up that's completely useless, if that thing came up and it said, would you like to create a new part? And it initiated the workflow into the process. There's going to be numerous other parts of that as well that need to be cleaned up along the way, and I will create a demonstration of all that it takes to create a single part, which is an action that you do probably once a month for each truck across all of the fleet, across every single unit that's out there in service right now. There was roughly you know, I'm going to say there's roughly 60 new parts or 75 new parts, and we have 75 vehicles in our fleet. So for it being as clunky of a process it is and how frequently you have to interact with it, it is something where there is time savings, and time is money. It's money savings for your clients and myself included. So I am not sure where I'm at on time, and I just lost that a little bit. So that was all right. So in my instance, I have 75 units. I had roughly 100 POs generated per month. I had roughly 1.4 POs created per asset that I was actively maintaining. My PO entry time is fairly significant. A lot of those little issues in the system are contributing to that. I don't have time in this video to show and try and map all that out and do the time motion studies. Parts. I had 106 new parts in the month of December. I think I had more than typical, but I think that there's going to be roughly, 50 to 75 or one per unit per month. And at the end of this video, I'm going to also include at the end of this video, I'm going to include a second video that is the part creation process, so that if you are interested, you can see the total time and the workflow associated with creating a new part in your parts management system. So I wanted to give these stats so that if you wanted to apply some of these metrics to your entire customer base, you can see what sort of savings you are able to potentially give your customers, a $35 burden rate for a part administrator times the number of units in the field. You could come up with, I'm guessing there's going to be $500,000 in savings for all of your customers in aggregate by making some of these changes. And hopefully if organizations are managing correctly, they're able to repurpose that time and make sure that they keep better track of inventory. They have the part administrator do a better job with their shop lead to help push things along and make the mechanics more productive. And those are the kind of things we want to try and do in the system. So lastly, I think this could have a huge impact. This is a really robust system, but I think some of these seemingly simple improvements could make the system way more user-friendly. People have a really high expectation for simplicity now, and you start to lose them in the implementation when there's these clunky details that they're just not used to. They're used to their Apple, their iPhone, they're used to their Android. Things click through, they don't have weird operating times, they don't have lags between fields, they don't have weird validations. Google and the larger companies are doing these validations across massive data sets and not having that time to process between transactions. There may be something fundamentally wrong with the tech stack that's underlying your product, but that's not a problem that I can know how to address. But I just want to bring it to attention. And I tried to pack as many high value items into the short video as I could, but I would love to work more thoroughly with your product team if given the opportunity. Please contact me directly if you have any other questions. My number is 425-359-7164. Again, my name is Chad with Johnson TMW LLC. I'm the owner and operator consultant of that business. And if you want to reach out to me via email, my email address is listed here as well. Thank you. You guys have a good one, and I hope this was helpful.